Welcome, everybody. This is going to be a talk about data governance, different methods and philosophies behind engaging in data governance, comparative methods in data governance. To help you understand the purpose of the talk, you will be learning about the kind of motivations behind data governance. And we're going to talk about 3 books. This way, you can develop your understanding of different potential approaches to data governance because the approach that is best suited is going to depend on your organization's level of data governance maturity and also the extent of stakeholder buy in. Potentially, it could also be dependent on kind of the organization's past experiences with data governance and obviously the goals for the future state. So, this is why I think having multiple tools in your toolkit is very important. We're going to be talking about a couple of different books. The first one is the Data Management Body of Knowledge. So, since I'm at my desk at home, I have all of these books with me so I can show you the physical versions. You can see my copy of the DMBOK is really marked up from my time studying for the CDMP. So, that's one good resource for data governance. And then we'll also be taking a look at non invasive data governance, which is a much more manageable and humane length. This book is really fun to read. I think Bob has a lot of personality that he infuses into his writing. The author's name is Robert Seiner. He's a great follow on LinkedIn. He writes a lot. And then the next book that we'll be discussing is called Get Governed. This is by Morgan Templar. What I really enjoyed about this book in particular is that she has sections where she specifically calls out how the ideas relate to small businesses or small organizations. So I think that was quite a cool perspective. Morgan is a healthcare expert. If any of those things are interesting to you, I recommend giving her a follow as well. And then the last book is called Disrupting Data Governance by Laura Madsen. She is a consultant with many years of experience. She just wrote a book on AI. I haven't read that one yet, but it's available for ordering now. If you like her content on data governance, you might pick up this one as well as the new AI book. It's a book-oriented presentation on different ideas in this space. Next, we'll get into a definition of data governance. As many of you are probably already aware, data governance refers to the exercise of authority and control over the management of data assets. So this is where like boots on the ground for an overall data management initiative. The first step is really to get data governance in place. So, rephrased, it provides direction and oversight for data management by establishing a system of decision rights over data that accounts for the needs of the organization. So, it's like really connecting data to value according to the mission of the business. It's important to note that the primary focus of data governance needs to be improving data quality, accessibility, security, privacy, and retention over time, not just monitoring for issues. That content, by the way, is from this big blue monster. If you haven't already picked this up in your work in data governance or data management, I recommend it. The chapter on data governance is chapter 3. So it goes into all of these kind of fundamental concepts in a bit more detail. And it also includes this lovely diagram called the Aiken framework. I really like the Aiken framework or the Aiken pyramid. I find it to be an intuitive way to understand how the different domains within data management really build upon each other. I'm thinking about ways to revisit this framework based on some conversations that I've had recently. So I think it's good, but it's not the end all be all. The reason I bring it up is because data governance really sits at the base of this pyramid. It is the foundation upon which other data management efforts should be constructed. Okay. If you look at this same topic from the perspective of many organizations today, you'll see all this hype around using data for the purposes of machine learning or maybe generative AI. The joke here is that the CEO thinks that they can skip straight to generative AI without first having built the rest of that pyramid with reasonable data practices. And as we all know, this is unlikely to be successful. And that's because data governance is really so important. It can help supply information across the organization, produce trusted, data-driven decision-making, encourage the generation of insights that relate to enhancing the customer experience, acquiring new customers, and better serving other constituents, supporting regulatory compliance. This is a must-have for data governance for many organizations. Also delivering value to the customer, sharpening the organization's competitive advantage, and helping them be more agile and more responsive to changes in the marketplace or the general competitive landscape. Okay, so one issue though is that data, at least in terms of headcount, is typically only about 4% of the enterprise. And the other 96% is focused on creating value in other ways. So, this can be a little bit of a challenge in terms of communicating the importance of data governance because of this imbalance between people who are responsible for managing the data and the rest of the business. I have these two different lists of benefits that the data people and the business people see as being derived from data management. These are really different viewpoints. So, even though the data people and the business people may share the same goals of whatever the organization's mission statement is, the data people and the business people typically have a different perspective on the role that data plays in achieving those goals. And this discrepancy can contribute to the tendency for the business to underinvest in data management capabilities. Therefore, it's really important for the data people to be able to communicate the vision and to share how data governance actually will support the business to go out and achieve its stated objectives. This presentation, I think, is really helpful for tapping into these authors' sense of what the motivations could be for data governance. And then you have, again, different tools to communicate back to the business why data governance is so important. So, not just the how of how to do data governance, this is really more focused on why, different viewpoints on why. So, this slide is just to show you that without data governance, data in the organization is like the parable of the blind men and the elephant. So, everybody has a different idea of what data is and what data is good for. And without data governance, clearly articulating what the rules are around working with data and also what the benefits are that can be derived from working with data, then there isn't a clear shared perspective because data is so many different things to different people. Jonas asked any guidelines on communicating data governance's importance to non-data people. And I would say that's like the mission of this talk. So we're just getting started with intro. Sorry, there was a lot of intro, to be fair. But hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll have a more clear idea. Another thing is outside of the scope of this talk, but I would say anytime that you can quantify the benefits associated with data, that can be really helpful for helping quantified minded business people to look back at the data and see the connection to value and then understand that data governance is the key to unlocking that value. So, data valuation is another topic that's really close to my heart. You can read the book Infonomics. Again, we're going to be looking at these three books. First one is Non-Invasive Data Governance by Robert Steiner. Bob tells us that the non-invasive data governance approach focuses on helping everybody who defines, produces, and uses data in an organization. That's probably pretty much everybody. Bob explains that the non-invasive aspect refers to the way that governance is implemented to ensure that important data assets are managed in a non-threatening manner. So he's really interested in identifying who is currently responsible for data and formalizing that responsibility while simultaneously trying to minimize the amount of additional work that's being handed to people. Can be hard, but that's the goal Bob is trying to get across in his work. A lot of data governance luminaries look at this other book by John Ladley called Data Governance as being an excellent resource. And John has a similar idea in the introduction to his book, which is why I'm calling out that quote here. So he says, if you examine any major corporate organization initiative, you will find data governance. It's like volunteer corn in a farmer's fallow field. So just going back to that idea of like data governance is everywhere, but it may be in a less formalized state. And if that's the case, then a good first step could be the non-invasive approach of formalizing those existing responsibilities. Bob also provides some guidelines around how to help people think about data as a shared resource where data governance is, in fact, everybody's responsibility. And leadership should understand that data should be stewarded and shared as a resource across the enterprise. Data governance should be applied to existing policies and practices to avoid introducing or emphasizing new processes. And again, this is, I think, like ambitious in its own way. We'll see contrasting views as we continue in this talk, but Bob really emphasizes that change management is a lot easier if you start from what people already know and what they're already doing. For example, identifying and assigning data stewards that are already engaged in the work and avoiding assigning extra work. The reason for that is people are already busy more than 100% of the time. They feel that if you're adding to their work effort, then they're more likely to push back against what you're trying to achieve. So we should really be trying to formalize responsibilities rather than give more work, is the dream. Moreover, Steiner highlights the role of data governance in mitigating data quality issues and supporting data integration, risk management, business intelligence, and master data management as well. My personal take on this approach is that it is pretty optimistic, and that if you have stakeholder buy-in for a longer project, or if it's the first time that the organization has implemented data governance, that this might be the correct approach for your organization. All right, just to wrap up this section, non-invasive data governance, the central thesis here is that data governance should be about formalizing existing data-related accountabilities rather than handing people new responsibilities. There is a question in the chat about how to assess maturity. There are formal data governance maturity assessment approaches. The one that I might point you to in particular is the one from Stanford University, the data governance maturity model. There's all kinds of tests that you could create to evaluate the maturity of your organization. One last quote to finish off this section. Data governance isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. So switching gears, now we're going to talk about Get Governed by Morgan Templar. Morgan tells us that some experts in the field of data governance will tell you that it is possible to establish non-invasive programs. This is only true after data governance becomes a part of the culture. So, like I said, some people are more skeptical of a non-invasive approach. Contrast to Robert Steiner, Templar really thinks that it is attainable potentially to have non-invasive governance, but only once you're past that stage of pushback and there's actually buy-in for this initiative already. So basically, I think she's saying that's not really truly non-invasive. She's like, you have to be invasive at the start. In fact, she goes on to say that data governance is extremely invasive during implementation because it must be inserted into every department, process, system, and corner of your business. So again, somewhat controversial stance in opposition to non-invasive data governance. So my personal favorite aspect of this book is the data governance program success checklist. I'm just going to run through that with you guys so that you can see an example of the project management framework that's discussed in this book. Because I think Templar really advises that there are cultural challenges related to data governance, but if the data governance implementation team is sufficiently organized and takes a very project management approach to addressing those potential barriers and bottlenecks, then that will contribute to the greatest chances of success. So here's the program success checklist. The first step is to create a data governance charter. That is another throwback to our blog. We have a nice sample charter that we put together because I agree with Morgan that this is a really good starting place. Next step is to solicit feedback from executive sponsors in the organization. Then use that feedback to get to a working document draft version of the charter. This is the blog post that I told you guys about. Okay. Next step is to socialize the charter with additional stakeholders and then go on to resolve any issues. Next, sketch out the organization structure, define milestones, and break those milestones into specific deliverables. Templar has an outline for every step in this plan, and she also has the experience to back that up. Like I mentioned, she works as a data management consultant and she has that small business experience as well. So she can really help. In this book, she really breaks it down for different levels in terms of enterprise size. I think this is good. It's very practical, especially her experiences is in healthcare. So if you are also in that industry, then it's even more relevant and directly applicable. Data governance charter document is really helpful. I think it should articulate the clear vision of what data governance is for. So if you can't explain that to yourself in a document, then it's going to be really hard to explain it to stakeholders and bring them on board. There's a lot more that goes into a charter. So just to wrap up this section about Get Governed, I think Morgan's stance is that data governance requires a series of top-down processes that can be summarized as a project management framework checklist. Yeah. certainly is a set of steps, and the more organized you are, the better your chances of success. All right, so for our final book, we're going to be talking about Disrupting Data Governance by Laura Madsen. So, Laura tells us that there's this old way of doing data governance, which is really the idea that she is writing in opposition to. She provides this memorable metaphor to explain the old way. And she says, governance was an attempt to control the rushing water. So we created a series of locks and dams. Your data stewards are out there or in hand, attempting to navigate the deluge. Their goal is to help you safely interact with your data. I just wanted to highlight here we have the command and control approach with restricting the amount of data that's available with the locks and dams. And then also this idea that data is dangerous and the stewards need to promote safety of interaction with the data. So it's less like data as a resource and like data as this like powerful force needs to be controlled and is associated with danger potentially. Similarly to the river metaphor, we have this other metaphor that she uses of a funnel where all the data in an organization is at the top of the funnel. And then we are outputting data through a data governance program. And the data that ends up available to the end user, to the consumer, is the data at the bottom of the funnel. Madsen then asks the readers to question whether this approach is the optimal way to think about data governance and what it should be doing for an organization. Laura asks us, how did you learn while growing up? End users must be allowed to get in there and roll up their sleeves. Right now, we have a funnel that is both small at the top and small at the bottom. So she's saying the data that's in scope for the data governance program is small, and the data that's available to the consumers also small. Okay, then she provides us with this table. In contrast to the old way of doing data governance, Madsen recommends that leadership think about the function of data governance as being 50% about increasing asset usage. So that was the question that we started with at the beginning is what's the purpose of data governance? Is it around usage of data assets? And this is, I think, an arguable idea. That's why the book has this kind of very confrontational title, Disrupting Data Governance. But yeah, this is the table that she puts forward. I also put it in a pie chart. Maybe this makes it easier for you to visualize it. But I would actually encourage you to put your own spin on this. Like, how does your organization think about data governance and what its purpose is? What's the relative allocations of these different potential data governance functions, right? For Laura, it's 50% about increasing use. It's 25% about improving data quality, improving and maintaining, 15% about creating a data catalog, and 10% around production. Yeah, so I guess other questions you could ask yourself aside from like, how do you construct the ratio between these different segments of the pie chart? But also, are there segments that are here that don't need to be, or are there segments that you would add back into this representation of the purpose of data governance? Just an alternative framework for thinking about what data governance is good for, and some tools like the pie chart and some nice metaphors to explain the flow of data through the data governance program. So definitely, I feel like this book is worth reading. The writing is like pretty straightforward. There's a lot of like personal stories, and Laura certainly infuses it with her personality in terms of the writing, so it's certainly not dry. So I just wanted to bolster this with a quote from another writer. This author, Anthony Algman, is also excellent, also super duper charismatic. He comes to these conferences sometimes. He's a great speaker if you ever get the opportunity. His book is called Data Leadership for Everyone. I heard him speak at the last DGIQ, and he told a room full of entry-level data governance people, he was like, we'll worry about data governance when we have data access. So this is just emphasizing again, Laura's not the only one who thinks that access to the data is super important and is a primary motivation. Anthony even puts it above data governance. If your organization is at the very early beginnings, then this is one way to conceptualize like the whole data management starting point. Cool. Okay. I think the key thesis of disrupting data governance is that the primary function of data governance is to increase the amount of data use. Okay, so I just have some bonus slides here. Vivian Bach tells us that data governance should be sustainable, embedded, and measured. These are 3 key characteristics of an effective data governance program. Like non-invasive data governance, the DMVOC also believes that the best data stewards are found and not made. Setting up data governance definitely requires a lot of time and energy, but because it's so foundational, it really helps to improve the organization's use of data. And the key starting point for that is to identify interested, willing people who can jump in and really help to steward the data through the organization. We have another blog post about the role of the data steward. If you're the person that's in charge of choosing these people and deciding what that role is called, I have some advice in this blog post. Feel free to disagree with it because I think it has been a little bit controversial as well. I certainly like the term data steward. I think it speaks to what this role is really about. Okay, best practices around data governance. The one I really want to highlight here is celebrating small wins. Our role in data management is hard, and data is very nebulous and highly conceptual. So, whenever you can make it tangible by conducting a data valuation exercise, tying data to benefits achieved for the organization, then it's really important to communicate that with your team and with interested stakeholders. So this could be like having a data governance newsletter that gets updated every quarter. So you're saying, here's what we achieved, here's what we did, and here's the impact that it had. And if you finish a project, like if you hit a significant milestone, then throw that pizza party, like whatever kind of budget that you can secure and then spend on these kind of small celebrations, that can really go a long way. Again, creating that buy in and communicating the vision to executive stakeholders. And that's going to be so key for the sustainability of the program. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for participating.